Welcome to I Heart Geek.
And welcome to another episode of I Heart Geek. It's magic. Phew.
I even have my cat. I have my familiar with me.
But it's not a black cat. It's got some black in it, though.
I grew up with a black cat. Does that count?
Sure, why not?
This is one of his 9 lives.
Today, we are brought to you by a very simple ESP test. If you know what I'm going to say about it, then you passed. Did anybody pass?
Yeah, we all did because we knew that
Totally.
that was coming.
That was bad, wasn't it?
100%.
Thanks.
That's
It's gonna
a
hurt my
lot.
feelings. We are talking shows of the occult, of magic, of supernatural. I was going to call it a supernatural show, but then everyone would just think, "Hey, supernatural," because we've talked about that show before, once or twice on the page. I think.
A few times.
Yeah.
Once, twice.
Real quick, let me introduce the panel. I'm Dub, and I do stuff, and with me is Miss Cheeky Chi. How are you doing?
I am wide awake and raring to go.
Outstanding. We have Mr. Blige. You doing good, sir?
Yeah, man, I'm ready to talk about this spooky. Maybe sometimes it's spooky
It's
stuff.
not spooky.
Sometimes it can be spooky.
But we were going to hit on that, though.
Yeah,
And
we'll
finally,
get into it.
Mr. Tomy, how are you doing today with your Yoda and your cat?
My Yoda and my cat, who thinks that my face is a really good place to put her tail. She has opinions. She wants to discuss the shows that we are discussing today.
Does she talk to you through you and stuff like Sabrina's cat in the good Sabrina series?
No, she's sort of more like the cat from Charmed who just breaks stuff and disappears when you actually want her.
You know, I have always wanted to get into Charmed, and I've watched a couple episodes, but I just can't get into it. I don't know.
I love it, but it really is a product of its time.
Yeah.
I absolutely adore it. And it's got that wonderful it's cheesy to us now. Back then, it was the bomb. Back then, it was like everybody wanted to be one of them. I might have adjusted my wardrobe to reflect.
Sounds like me with Crow.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah, I was about to say the same thing because Tara, she loves it. And she just recently started watching again before they took it off of Netflix. And I tried to watch it too because I was like, man, I could get into something like this. And it's real cheeseball, especially in those early seasons at the very beginning. As they evolved and got the story to progress, it gets better. But oh boy, some of those early seasons.
It just seems like one of those shows that's easy to, if it's not in front of your face, you forget about it.
Oh no.
Just to me personally.
Yeah.
I say I've been
I'm on the
wanting
same
to
page.
watch it, but
For sure.
yeah.
Yeah, I loved it, but I hated the ending.
Was it just?
Spoiler.
It was a
Okay,
little
yeah.
pat. It was a little like tied up in a bow.
Have you
Yeah.
watched the revival of it? Anyone?
Yes.
How do you feel about it?
Judging by that short of an answer, I think I know what she thinks about it.
I think that some things you can't recreate, no matter how hard you try.
Fair enough.
Sometimes it's better to if you want to hop on the success of something like that, make it something that's
Next gen, yeah.
next gen, exactly, or make it Charmed-esque.
See, and I feel like they did do that. We watched the new one, and maybe it's because I don't have as deep of a connection with the source material that it was from. But from what I had seen of the originals, like I said, especially in those later seasons, it seems like what they did was they took the plot of 4 or 5 seasons and condensed it so they could start their own story. Because there was a lot of pulls from the different seasons. But like I said, it could just be, I enjoyed it, but it could just be because I don't have the deep fondness for the source material.
Well, and the original, like we were talking about, I didn't like the ending, but they tied it up in a pretty bow.
Uh-huh.
And so they could have done the next Charmed, or they took the same characters and tried to build a brand new story.
Mm-hmm.
And for people that have watched it my daughter watched it with me, so she's like, the new one, she's like, they're trying too hard.
Yeah.
That's what it comes off as. I watched the first episode and I just couldn't commit.
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
I lost a bet, so I had to watch the whole thing.
Ouch. So let's talk the supernatural occult type genre is like the most diverse storytelling tool I think there is. I mean, this starts way back in the 60s with Bewitched, Maybe I Dream of Jeannie, The Addams Family. I mean, just staples of, what is the building blocks of TV. And it goes all the way now to, it went through cartoons like Scooby-Doo and the Smurfs. And I mean, now it even goes like the teen drama thing with like Riverdale, Sabrina with
Chilling Adventures.
That I like the original one better. The Cheese
I like
Factory.
the new one.
But I do want to talk about that. Yeah. They're not. I don't think you can really say them in the same breath.
No.
But what is some of your guys' favorite genres that we can use under this storytelling?
For me, fantasy,
such
as like Merlin,
swords and sorcery type stuff. Gotcha.
Swords and sorcery, stuff that's like seated in lore.
Mm-hmm.
So
mythology.
Yeah.
Satomi?
Even though I have a very soft spot in my heart for the fantasy stuff, and a big fan of Merlin, the BBC show, I love some urban magic. I love me some urban magic. Like we'll discuss Sabrina later, but that was actually something that I enjoyed. Even something like, even though it is not a perfect show, I have issues with it. Lock and Key has got some great stuff going on there.
I love the comic.
And I need to read the comic because I bet it's better. And I even enjoyed, and it's super cheesy, but I even enjoyed Tin Man, because of that sort of like taking that fantasy world and marrying it to, it's one of the reasons that I love Harry Potter. It's that whole, I know it couldn't happen, but it could happen.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That wonder that,
That's really good, actually. Blythe?
I'd have to probably agree with Satomi. I like the old stories, and I like when they pull from the different types of lore and things like that, especially when they pull into the modern era. So stories like Grimm, and even the Once Upon a Time, where they took all the Disney properties and they brought it into a modern era. Those types of things are super cool because it's not. I don't worry so much about kind of what we talked about before, worrying about the source material. It's hard when you try and remake something that is so beloved and put your own little spin on it without saying this is a completely different story. When you try and do that, you're going to upset a lot of the fan base because everyone loves what they love. But when you take that old stuff and you put it into a new setting and you say, these are what we're grabbing from, but we're doing our own take on it.
Yeah.
I think that's where you find that sweet spot of being able to enjoy it without getting mad at what they're trying to redo. It's not a reboot, it's just a reimagining.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's different enough.
Yes.
They make it different enough that you can buy it as a reimagine. Yeah.
Exactly.
Now we all kind of hit on the things that we really like about some of these. I mean, it's got to have that. I think it has to have a little bit of lightheartedness in it to be successful. I think there needs to be a little humor behind it, and I think that there's some lines that once it hits that line, I'm uncomfortable with watching a show at that point. Just me personally, I know these are going to be very personal. This isn't like right and wrong, but I think there's going to be different things for everybody. But what is it that do you all understand what I'm saying when, it feels like the show's gone too far and it feels like wrong? Does that make sense to anybody?
Not quite.
Well, yeah. Let me throw my example, and I know that Satomi's going to not agree with me, but Sabrina, I like the first season. I watched it until the cannibal episode. And I'm like, at that point, I'm like, this is too much. I can't handle it. It's too gritty and gross. And it's like trying to get that dark side of magic, which that was the point it went too far. So I don't know if you guys have a line that's like, I can't watch this anymore. It's really not my thing.
I think, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think for me, that's a very rare thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because the way I think, I can follow lines and pick it up, and I have a very high tolerance for gritty.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think, for me, if it's the crossing of the line is more when it becomes too cheesy versus too gritty. So I have that line. It's just different than yours.
Yeah.
I pretty much agree with Christina on that one. I think the other thing is if the plot has to work way too hard.
Yeah.
If there's a twist that's just way beyond. I mean, magic is already beyond plausibility.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, something that's ridiculous is delightful. But there is such a thing as trying too hard. Now, for me, it happens very rarely as well. So it's hard for me to think of an example.
Yeah.
I think the only example that I would say is the finale of Charmed is a good example of that. And I think it was because they were rolling along a song, and then it was like, oh, we're ending the series. We have to, it was very clear the last couple of episodes were like, oh my God, let's tie up every loose end. And that's when it gets a bit much. Well, also, I was just going to say, I'm not a big fan of the let's bring a new spunky young character in to liven up the show. That's something that I always missed real hard. Yeah. They did it in Charmed. They did it in Buffy.
Well, that's every sitcom in history, though. That's just bad storytelling, honestly.
And that has to do with these long-running shows. Because how many seasons was Charmed? It was like 8 or 9, right?
Mm-hmm. It was around.
That's a long time for a show. Buffy was 8 too, right?
I think so.
Yeah. So I don't
know.
And towards the end, it got to be a little much.
The 2 points that you made there that you don't like are both, I think, they're both reactive to a show that runs that long. Because when you have a show that's going that long, eventually, regardless of how much they have written or planned out for however many seasons, they could be told the next day that their show's getting axed. So they have to wrap it up as quickly as they possibly can. And the second one being, they got to do something to try and to bring in more of a demographic, because by the time you've gone 8-9 years, your demographic that was your angsty teenagers are no longer angsty teenagers. They're angsty young adults.
Yeah.
So you gotta try and keep a hold of that old demographic, which stinks because there's some shows that I want to see continue, but at the same time, if they keep going, they're just gonna fall victim to that time and time again.
Except I think that issue is with the producers and with the studio. Mm-hmm. Because if you watch a franchise like Harry Potter, where with the books, we literally saw a generation grow as Harry grew. Mm-hmm. And then they brought their kids in to then kind of follow up behind them and keep going.
Yeah.
So I think if the producers and the studios would trust their dang product and their fandom, that they would actually have a whole lot more success with that. I think a lot of that, we need to get that younger thing, it's fear driven, because the demographic with expendable income is
it's what you want.
Not the 18-year-olds, and it's not the 12-year-olds.
Yeah.
You want those 30-year-olds tuning in. So
we buy your merch.
Yep. Yep. And go to your movies and bring our kids to your movies, so it keeps going.
But going back, and this isn't just for magic stuff, but but it really does. equate to the magic stuff a lot is that source material. If you don't have the right source material to grow with, you're gonna, there's only so much that people can stomach of the same story over and over and over again at the same age. So not everything can be The Simpsons.
Right. Or Supernatural, which is only now they're
done.
They're done.
Are we?
But that's been going for a long time.
Are we open to talk about Supernatural? Because that was going to be a point that I brought up.
Absolutely. I think that's okay.
So I know this fan base loves their content. I love the show. I love Supernatural. But that show is a show that went on far too long.
I know the fan base.
I'm scared. But it has its ups and its downs. But the last half of that series, I think, saw more downs than it did ups for kinds of those reasons. They seem to be continuing it just to continue because they know they had this like niche fan base that they wanted to keep going. And that's awesome of them. I know that the creators of the show and the cast of the show really love their fans, and they really wanted to be there for them, but it's just there's just some seasons there that I was just like, oh man, I don't know if I can keep watching this show. And I think that's just a victim of it going on a lot longer than it needed to. Because really that show was supposed to and could have ended after season 5, but they extended it out another 10 years.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I actually didn't watch the last 4 seasons until recently when I knew it was over.
Yeah.
So let me ask this question. Then this is for the comments. If you're one of our people that are into Supernatural a lot, you know who you are. We have about 15 of you guys that are really into it, and no one's making fun. That's just cool. I want to know, what is it that kept your interest for that long? Because I know that everybody that's a super fan of that has not missed an episode.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the same formula? Is it the magic stuff? Is it just the characters that you love? Could they have dropped the magic stuff altogether and you would have been okay with it? There's a lot of questions. I want to know what's kept your interest for so long on a show that ran that long.
It's got to be the love for the characters. I've been around that fan base a lot, and I think it's 100. I would love to hear if they have any other reasons if they loved the continuing seasons, but I think it's definitely a love for the characters, because we all have those shows, those movies where we just are in love with the characters, and regardless of what they do or what they're in, they can do no wrong because those are our characters.
I will never stop watching Doctor Who.
Yep.
There you go. See?
Yep. I'm also curious if changing showrunners and writers, finding people with fresh takes would help a show like that. Because, I mean, you look at something like Law and Order, they're in season 21.
And there's 100 episodes per season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The never-ending TV show. Okay.
NCIS is like that too, because they're constantly changing out characters, whether it be through tragedy or, so I think that's another great example of that evolution. And I think they're in like season 19, Criminal Minds.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
those shows are your modern day soap operas. Those are your prime time slotted soap operas, because once they get to those seasons where it's like 20 seasons deep, they're like, oh, this person's been dead for 3 years, but now they're back because they joined the CIA and they had a mask on the entire time.
But I say that's what's nice with the plot devices with the Supernatural type. And I'm not talking about the show, I'm talking about the plot device. Mm-hmm. Because you can bring people back and bring back people as different characters that are the same character. I think that's actually a really fantastic storytelling. Let's take, because I know that we didn't mention it much, and because it is so magical based, but at the same time it's based in science-ish, is Doctor Who. Brought that up earlier. That's actually a really good example of the longevity, because they've literally lasted from Bewitched to today, and they have more or less really kind of kept with the times the whole time.
Well, when you have the advantage of being able to kill off your main character every few seasons and yet still have the main character be the main character.
Mm-hmm.
And they haven't been shy about changing showrunners, giving other writers and directors an opportunity. There's some things that I've loved about. I mean, I love Jodie Whittaker. There have been some writing issues there. There's something about that constant fresh blood, and the companions get switched out all the time, but it's just they've got this arc that they're able to sort of ride. And I think that's why it works, because it can change with the changing doctor.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, if somebody else tries to do that, it's always going to be a copycat.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Bill and Ted. Wait, what?
Oh, I did enjoy Bill and Ted, though.
I
loved Bill and Ted.
I actually, I really loved the second one a lot, or the third one. So they redeemed themselves.
But they really did. They didn't do the magic thing that Doctor Who does.
Yeah.
And I think that is the plot, the ultimate in plot device is what we've talked about. It's, yes, he regenerates. There's no science behind it. It's magic. Let's be honest. Which is, and I think that's fantastic that they've done that way. And that is some of that. How do I put this? It's the supernatural storytelling that isn't offensive to anyone. There is some supernatural storytelling that is offensive to half the audience. Period. Doctor Who, the way they've done it, has had zero. Because it's just so acceptable, and I don't know if I think that's some of that they did it right. If that makes sense to everybody.
Plus, they're British.
Yeah, because it's just those crazy Brits.
I think a big part of that might be because Doctor Who focuses a lot on, like, primarily on the Doctor himself, and not so much of what's going on around him. Like he has the things that he gets into and the week to week shows and stuff like that, but you're so focused on what that character of the Doctor, and because they changed the Doctor so much, how is this Doctor going to be portrayed? What's he going to bring to the table, or she, what are they going to bring to the table that the previous Doctors didn't? And the stuff that could be considered magical or science fiction-y around him, it just kind of falls into that character, because that's the part that's expected. The part that's expected is all the sci-fi mysticism, but the stuff that you really want to get into is how that new character is bringing something to the table.
I also like the way that first of all, great point. But I also like how they address magic. Mm-hmm. And they say in general, it's something that just hasn't been explained yet. Mm-hmm. And because of that, it ties back into our whole desire for magic to be real.
Yeah.
So, it's like, oh, well, it still could be real, because it could simply be something that we just haven't figured out how it's done yet.
Yeah. It's the Thor explanation. That's how they explain it in the MCU, is that magic is it's science. Asgard is just scientifically advanced past our understanding, that what we see it is perceived as magic.
Mm-hmm. Which I think that is the shows that last, with maybe the exception of Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie, that type of stuff, that it feels like, okay, well, it's magic, but it's definitely explainable magic. And I think that's really that line that I think everybody wants in the occult type movies. They don't want it to be, a power from the devil. I mean, in general, unless you're watching Sabrina, that's not where it's coming from. It's, there is a science-ish behind it. And I think that people like that, because people don't want their unexplained to be too unexplained.
Some people, some of us don't care.
Like some people. Well, I mean, I know this is going to show up later, but like X-Files, for instance, there was always some amount of explanation, even behind the most unexplainable stuff. And that
I find it interesting that you're including X-Files in this area, but definitely, I mean, there is that massive supernatural aspect to it. I was very surprised when you started to bring that in, and a lot of our commenters did as well.
Yeah.
And I would love for you to go into why does X-Files fall under this heading?
Well, didn't it branch off in later seasons from being like alien focused to start being like Monster of the Week?
Well,
it really did a little.
So with X-Files, just shush and listen, guys. Okay. So the thing about X-Files is that he was always searching for the alien answer. But if you've actually watched it, there are other telekinesis answers. There's supernatural answers.
There's ESP.
So yes, yep. So he's always searching for the alien answer because of his sister. But there are so many things, and that's why they were such a great team. You know, Scully and Mulder, one searching for the truth, one is very based in science, very based in facts. And there are episodes of X-Files that haunt me to this day. There's a reason I don't like escalators, and it's courtesy of X-Files.
And there's a balance to it. That's I think why people are drawn to it. There is that balance between, they never use the word magic, but there's a balance between science and the supernatural.
Yep.
That really, I think that's why that show lasted forever.
9 seasons. And
you know,
it never felt tired. Yeah. And it never felt tired. And you could pick up and watch it today and it would still be relevant, like as far as for the genre.
And I guess it's very procedural. You don't have to watch every episode. You can pick season 4, episode 9. Okay, I know exactly what's going on. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there was some overreaching arc, but you didn't have to have it. But I think that's where you were seeing a lot of our listeners were getting into that, the X-Files thing, because people like to have that, like what we were talking earlier. We can't explain it, but it's there. We're this close.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what people want.
Yeah, because they have episodes that go deep into like Native American lore on X-Files, and those are very like that magic type based. So
cool. Thanks for that.
So really, Supernatural is just the X-Files for a more angsty generation.
Actually,
I don't want to piss off the fan base, so sure, why not?
I agree with you. And we talked about Supernatural when it like should have ended on season 5. I lost interest when it stopped being about lore and urban legends and ghosts, and it started being more like angels and demons. And not that I'm anti that, but I felt like it completely changed the show, in my opinion, and what I loved about it.
Agreed.
But I say that is just another chapter in the supernatural genre. You know, you've got to be able to be open to everything if you're going to go open that. You know, like Twilight Zone, that kind of stuff. It has a little bit of everything. Some of it's science, some of it is 100% unexplainable, some of it's aliens. You don't know, and it's the best kind of lazy storytelling in the world. And I'm not saying that as a negative, but that is is why it fits with every genre so well.
Yeah. I don't think it's so much lazy as it is you got to come up with more content if you're planning on doing the long haul. So you keep rolling with the ideas that are coming to you. Some of them work, some of them don't.
Yep.
This time I am not using lazy as
I get
as a down, but it's easy to be able to explain things that you couldn't explain otherwise. You know, we'll get into that.
Sky's the limit storytelling.
Yeah,
which is fun.
You know, it's the kind of thing that we used to do when we were kids.
Yeah.
Where you'd just be playing and it's like, okay, and then the spaceship comes in and it's carrying a gigantic gorilla who speaks Chinese, but you can understand him, you know? And so there's just because it's no holds barred, it's like we get to see our biggest fantasies and the ones that we never even knew that we had or wanted come to life before our eyes. It's wonderful.
And I think that's why we're seeing your point right there, Satomi, is exactly why we're seeing the best sorts of TV now, because with things like The Mandalorian, that show is because Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau busted out their toys and they just had a play date.
Exactly.
And they wrote it down.
which all opens up the whole supernatural thing, because that is not Mandalorian is not a supernatural show, but it is playing in the toy box, and I think that is what all the supernatural stuff really is just
what is the Force, Dub?
It's just space wizards, man. It's just
space
wizards.
That's just Buddhist religion. Sorry, no.
Yoda is Space Merlin.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I want a bumper sticker. Yoda is Space Merlin.
Wow.
He's got the robes and everything.
Yep.
You just killed Dub. So let's move on real quick and let's jump on to our listener feedback.
And now, let's see what all of our geek rock stars have to say.
Okay, now this is going to be weird. So, Tommy, do you want to read our listener feedback for us today?
I would love to read our listener feedback for us today. So thank you all for chiming in and letting us know about your favorite supernatural shows. I can't get to everybody, but I will, and I can't even read all of everybody's because we have these wonderful novels here. But starting with you. Yes, they seriously are. They're op-eds about this. So Eugene Taylor Ray said, this is almost an impossible question to answer. Yes. Eugenie. Since there are so many and each in their own way. And she says, for magic, the magicians, yes. It takes the Chronicles of Narnia and Harry Potter, infuses it with all the reality of our existence, and the fact that they aren't children but grad students created storylines that were emotionally challenging. She also loved, for Unexplained Phenomenon, The X-Files, and Supernatural, The Witcher. Kelly Lawrence says there's too many to count. I agree with you. For magic, she likes Fate, the Winx Saga. It was really good. Follows high school students who are fairies or warriors. They really play on the fact that these young adults are coming into their own and make mistakes. For fairy tales, she loved Grimm. And she also enjoyed Once Upon a Time. Justin McLean, I feel like I should say that with a Scottish accent. Justin McLean is currently watching The Witcher. He loves the setting and his character. It feels a little bit like The Mandalorian does LARPing, but it's still good. I really enjoyed that. He's also an X-Files fan, a Buffy and Angel fan. Yes. And then finally, Danielle Ariana. When she was a kid, she loved a show called Ghost Rider, which were kid detectives that were helped out by a paranormal entity, which is amazing. And then, of course, big fan of Charmed, because I am. And Danielle and I have known each other for many, many moons. So yes, my girl.
Nice. Well, thank you, everybody, for your feedback. It's awesome. We really appreciate it. Just something to say on that, boys?
She brought up a point that I didn't even think of all the old like Nickelodeon and Disney shows that came out. Like, Are You Afraid of the Dark was one.
Oh.
I forget what it's. Goosebumps is one. There was one where it was like a daughter and her mom was a rock star and they were on like a tour bus, and everywhere they stopped, they dealt with like paranormal investigation things. Like just so many from that.
Erie, Indiana, if you don't remember that one.
It's crazy. I didn't even think of my childhood growing up to think of these shows.
Well, and like the old movies like Watcher in the Woods and Something Wicked This Way Comes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, terrifying stuff. We were scarred for life.
Yep.
So let me ask this actually before we go on to our main event. What is kind of the line between sci-fi fun supernatural fun and supernatural horror? That just kind of brought that to mind, because that's like, I think it's honestly, remember we were talking that line earlier, when it turns into horror, that's when I'm not a fan, because I'm not a horror fan.
I think that Supernatural did a good job of that, especially in the earlier seasons, because there are some scenes that are brutal. They're like, it never exactly shows anything because it was a CW show, but you'd get like an attack and then a big thing of blood splatter across the window of a car or something like that. And in the blood splatter, there's like little chunks. So it's just like I think that's the line when it starts to remove itself from being campy to being like almost like a slasher film.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what he said.
You win. Bly's get
yeah.
Well, and I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Everybody has their own line.
Yeah.
So I don't think, like, for you, that line is very definitive, Dub. For me, it's not.
Lots of grays.
I love a good horror moment. Like, that's still fun for me. That's not fun for you.
Yep. Another genre that fits within the supernatural category that kind of pushes that line is when a new vampire show comes out. You have your CW vampire shows that keep it constrained, and then you have like your HBO. Yeah, well, not so much your sparkles, but but then you have your HBO vampire shows, which take it to that level of being.
That was Vampire Prawn.
Vampire Prawn?
Well, you can't say the other thing and not get kicked off of YouTube.
Oh, I got you. I'm like picturing a mantis shrimp, like.
With fangs. Like,
if that show would have went another 2 seasons, we would have seen it.
Oh man, how terrifying! That's a movie that should be made. Little shrimps that are actually vampires. That's terrifying.
They had something like that. It was what was that? The Kevin Smith, the Yoga Hosers.
I don't know. Just call it Prawn V.
Oh
God.
Yeah, B-rated cheesy horror movie.
Gross. And let's move us on to our main event.
Now it's time for the main event.
Okay, so for today's main event, we are talking our 5 favorite supernatural type shows ever. It starts with Laurel and Hardy meets Frankenstein. Actually, we could make that, couldn't we? Dang, someone.
I mean, we couldn't do it. We don't have the production budget for it.
Wah wah. Yeah, we can't raise people from the dead like Wanda. Oh, no,
Joy killer.
Let's not.
There is no spoiler there. That was a joke out of nowhere. I'm sorry. Okay,
you can't mess with that right now.
So for my number 5 is kind of the antithesis of what would be a psychological or a supernatural show, which is Psych, which was the premise that everybody thought he was a psychic and could do these supernatural things. But then you look, he's 100% logical, and he's just, he's very observant. He's like Encyclopedia Brown. It's fantastic. If you haven't watched Psych, it's a great show, but I liked putting this into this list because it was not at all, but the cast of characters around him all thought it was the supernatural. I thought that was a really interesting take on it.
That show was like almost a modern day Sherlock Holmes, right? Isn't that what he did?
Yeah, kind
of.
He
would just deduce the scenario going on around him.
He just learned how to notice everything as a small child.
Yes.
It was Encyclopedia Brown. Okay, Christina, what is your number 5?
Fate, the Winx Saga. It just came out on Netflix. I have a couple of little issues with it, but overall, I've really enjoyed it. I like the storylines. And I love that they've given the fairies different powers, and to watch that grow and expand. And so I've really, really enjoyed it.
Did any of them say Hadouken?
No. No.
But there is Doctor Who crossover.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Is there really?
One of the actresses.
Okay. I thought it was like.
Does she play the same character?
No.
No, she plays the bad guy though. She plays the villain.
Fair enough. Okay, Blythe, what is your number 5?
My number 5 is a show called Mortal Instruments. It was a book, and then they made it into a movie, and then they made it into the show.
Is that like a sci-fi show, or where can I find that one? Because I wanted to see it.
It's good.
Instruments. I don't think it was sci-fi. I'll look and find it. It might be on Hulu. I'll look and see where you can.
Hulu or
But
Amazon.
the show is really good. The movie, it was one of those. Back to our last episode. It was one of those adaptations where they just try to fit too much into the single movie, and I think they had a plan to do a series of movies, and it just didn't pan out. And the series was able to take that story and really flesh it out more. So it was a lot better.
Outstanding. So Tomi, what is your number 5?
Well, in all of its cheesy glory, I am still a fan of Charmed. I watch it knowing I commit to the Velveeta. Sometimes it's a nice feta, and sometimes it's a little Gouda.
It's a Munster.
And then sometimes it's straight up spray cheese. But it is just delightful. It's always quirky and delightful.
Can I ask this one question? Which is your favorite cast? Because I know they had like a couple of different casts going through. Alyssa Milano was in one, and Rose McGowan was in one, and
Alyssa Milano and Holly Hunter were in all of it.
Oh, okay.
They just changed out
Holly Marie Combs.
Yeah, sorry, Holly Marie Combs.
That's okay. They're the same person.
They just changed out Shannon Doherty for Rose McGowan.
Which was better?
They were just different.
Yeah, wow, nobody wants to make a stand. Nice.
Well, they were two different characters. I think people enjoyed I forget the actress's name, but I know you just said it, Prue. I think they enjoyed her while she was on the show. But from what I've heard behind the scenes, or at least from what Tara has told me, there was a lot of
drama.
A lot of drama
behind the scenes that were on
with her and the other characters. Which I think once they did the cast change, once you get rid of that, of course, the show flows better because everyone's having a good time and it's not that much of a hindrance anymore.
See, and I think that behind the scene drama gave more of an intensity on screen. So I personally preferred Prue. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that Rose McGowan did a bad job, but I really loved that there was this level of tension that because there was all this drama backstage, it was naturally coming forth on front stage.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Okay, so let's move on to my number 4, and this is not any of the live versions. The live versions are all of the devil, but the cartoon version of Scooby-Doo. That's the epitome of what is a logical, supernatural adventure every week. Yes, it was the guy that was running the park every week. It was
and I would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for those pesky kids.
But they always went through and they explained, as someone who, as a kid who was not into horror, you'd see all these scary things and then they go and explain how they did it. And that was really it was refreshing for me. And it's something that I always enjoyed growing up. And that's what made me be able to enjoy this kind of genre.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's where Dup got his logic skills.
I have none. So
I can sit behind the mirror. That's what we have to blame.
I actually, hearing you talk about that, I think that was the seed for my obsession with haunted houses. Yeah. And wanting to, if I were in a perfect world and had a ton of money, I would start my own.
Nice.
Like literally.
Like 24 or like 365 a year type.
All right. We know where we know where to invest our money when we hit the big time, guys.
Heck yeah. I actually have a whole we'll talk about this later. I have a whole concept already drawn out, y'all.
I love it.
Christina, what is your number 4?
My number 4 is Merlin BBC. What I like about that, I love it because I naturally love like the King Arthur lore, but they did like the origin story, like how they started when they were younger, and to watch that drama and that journey and to understand that maybe Morgana wasn't always a bad person and to see what pushed her to that edge. Because I like it when they humanize the villain to a certain level, because I don't think everybody's born absolutely horribly evil, but there's a journey to get there.
Mm-hmm. I loved every episode until the last one. Actually, the last 10 minutes of the last one. Oh, that was sad.
Yeah, me too.
Me too.
It needed to happen because that is the lore. But it was like, dang it.
Bly's your number 4, sir?
My number 4 is Grimm. We talked about it a little bit earlier. That's one of those shows that pulls from the lore that everyone knows and they love, and it sticks it into a modern era. And I really, really enjoyed that aspect of it.
Yeah, and that was one of the 2 shows that have been the most Fable-like.
Mm-hmm.
If you've heard me talk before, you know I love the comic series Fables. Yeah. Very much, you know that they read those comic books when they were writing those shows, and I think that still makes me happy. Satomi?
Big Buffy and Angel fan. I'm putting them as one show because they kind of are.
P.S. We are doing a Buffy and Angel episode in next month, so yeah,
I'm ready.
So I'm not going to get into it now.
But they're fantastic shows that will be talking about for a full hour. So yeah, we don't need to hit too much on that. Okay, so my number 3 is a newer show that is not finished yet. Love the book. I've loved both seasons that I've seen. I haven't seen the 3rd season yet of American Gods. Just by the greatest writer ever. Just such an interesting take on on folklore and why we believe what we believe, both as as a race and as a people in general and as Americans. I think it's a very fantastic look at things. So it's definitely, I would recommend checking it out. Christina?
So I changed out my number 3. I originally did have Supernatural, but really it's Supernatural seasons 1 through 5.
Okay.
And Blythe really made me realize that because it took me so long to watch the rest of them. But Amazon has a series called Lore.
Mm-hmm.
Every episode is kind of standalone, so you don't need to watch them in any particular order. But if you love magic and you love lore, this is the show for you. It's really brilliantly done. And I think we're on season 4 right now, 3 or 4, but I love everything about it.
And Dub,
there's a podcast that goes with that.
Yeah.
Just about to say that show started as a podcast. It was a podcast, and the podcast was so beloved that they made it into a show.
So when are they going to make the I Heart Geek show on Amazon?
They can't find actors as good as this mug, dude. Can't do it.
I'll appear. I will totally appear, or I'll let David Tennant be me, whichever one wants to happen.
It's the hair.
It's the hair. Well, then, what's his name? American History X. Edward Norton. He can play me.
Edward Norton.
We know he'll shave a head for a role. Blythe, what about you?
It might not be his own.
My number 3 is Lock and Key. I haven't read the books yet. No, I know you love the books, Dub, but
I do.
That show is great. I knew it was a comic going into it, but I didn't know anything about it. And from start to finish, I loved the entire ride. So I'm excited to see if they continue the story. But even if they don't, I feel like they ended it on a solid note. I think they could have ran it for 1 season and just a good show.
I think that's fair. Satomi?
First of all, Blythe, Lock and Key has one of the coolest concepts I've ever seen in a show. So very cool. It's not a perfect show, but yes. I believe this actually was a graphic novel as well. I love The Umbrella Academy.
It is, yes.
It is, yeah.
Written by the lead singer from My Chemical Romance.
How cool is that? Well, I mean, the fact that it's sort of, MCU meets magic, meets gritty, is just so fun. There's also Broadway representing in there. I've really enjoyed both seasons, and I'm looking forward to the next one.
Nice. Okay, my number 2, I have switched out. It was Once Upon a Time, but yeah, we've all seen it. And the second half of the show made it so bad that I decided to take off my list. But the first half was so good.
Ironically, I really liked the ending of that show.
Oh, I hated it.
See, I liked it because I felt like they tied everything together, and it was one of the one times I didn't mind a Pretty Little Bow.
Yeah. But what I changed it to instead was Good Omens.
Oh yes!
Oh, wow.
I know y'all mad at yourself for not picking that on your list.
We need to do a show on Good Omens,
Yes,
or on David Tennant and Michael Sheen.
We will do that on a Patreon. That show is just fantastic. And the cinematography on it is beautiful. The acting is fantastic. The story, this is one of those stories you got to watch it twice. Yeah, well, it's so much better the second time you watch it.
Yep.
And I appreciate shows like that you like it the first time and the second time you love it, because I understand this now. Yes, this is awesome. So Good Omens, that is on Amazon Prime, and you should probably watch it. And we are going to have to do a Patreon episode on that.
Yes.
Yep.
Cheeky Chi, what is your number 2?
Shadowhunters.
What is that?
So Shadowhunters is a story about a young lady when she hits her 16th or 18th birthday, I can't remember. She reaches realization of who she is, and she's half angel, half human, and they hunt demons. And it's I think it's 3 or 4 seasons. It's tied up very well at the end, but it's not a Pretty Little Bow, but it definitely has the ending. Really well done. I recommend you give it a try. It's teenager-y, but it's so good, and there's a lot of drama, and it might be a little too much for you, Deb, because I think it might cross that line of the gore. But it's just freaking awesome.
This is so funny, and this happens to me and Cheeky Chi all the time when we find out that we enjoy the same types of things. Shadowhunters is the name of the show. That's Mortal Instruments. So my 5 is Cheeky Chi's number 2.
Wow.
Yeah, because Shadowhunters is based off of the book Mortal Instruments, which is the movie's also called Mortal Instruments as well.
Nice.
But I agree with everything that you just said, Cheeky Chi.
Yeah, it's so good.
So good.
So Blythe, that was your number 2?
No, my number 2 is Legends of Tomorrow. That was a show. I don't know if you guys have followed it all the way to current, but
I couldn't.
Started out as a superhero show, and it has brought its way into the supernatural element, which I loved to see that evolution of it. They brought in John Constantine and started messing with supernatural aspects of the DC universe. And it was it's been great. It's a fun show that if you're not like one of the diehard, like stick to my source material, then you'll have fun with it, because it just plays with the universe. And nice.
It's
a lot of fun.
So Tommy?
My number 2 is a show that a lot of people don't know about, and you should. This is a BBC show called The Misfits. And it's essentially what would happen. I know, Dov, you're right with me there. It is so good. The acting is excellent. The storytelling is exquisite. It is weird and gritty and hopeful and heartbreaking and funny as heck. Not safe for work, so don't, this is not about your kids watching this. And it is just to give you an idea, the kind of the premise is that there's a freak storm, and after this freak storm, just random people end up with these supernatural powers, and it can be everything from time travel and like super cool ones to
controlling milk.
Controlling milk. Exactly. So it can be these really great ones or these really stupid ones, and the people who end up with these powers,
don't deserve
just
them.
Random.
Yeah, they do not deserve them.
So you're not necessarily exactly. And
let me put this as a stamp. I would rather watch Misfits if it was the first time for watching everything. I would rather watch Misfits than anything from the Marvel or DC universe as a first time view. That's how good it is.
I'm with you there.
As far as the series goes.
It's funny that you you describe that universe, and it's the same universe as my favorite show, My Hero Academia, because that's exactly what that universe did. Is they took the world and they gave 80% of the people in it powers, and it can be anything from your sweat creates explosions to you're able to telekinetically lift small objects. You can't do big ones, but you can bring a can of soda.
It is a completely different show.
Oh yeah, no,
the guy who watches both.
the premise there of just having a wide variety of powers in a world is great. So I'm definitely going to be checking it out.
Yeah, and it looks like there's a new show coming out with a similar premise, but a little more serious.
I hope they never Americanize it. Yeah.
That's the thing is it looks like a very American take on it, whereas Misfits lives up to that name, where there's a lot of quirk, and every episode you're gonna laugh, you're gonna cry, you're gonna be scared.
And don't get attached to any character.
And don't get attached.
Any character.
You're gonna get attached. You're gonna get attached.
So Tomi used the word quirk. That's what they call the superpowers in My Hero Academia.
Nerd.
Proud of it.
Okay, so let's move on to number ones, and I want to because nobody mentioned it, I had to throw out one honorable mention. That's Lucifer, which was just such a great show, and I'm sorry that it's ending. Okay, but my number one is Twilight Zone. I think that is the king of all supernatural shows. I think if there's no Twilight Zone, there is no X-Files, there is no Supernatural, there is no anything that we've talked about today, with a lot of exceptions, because that opened the doors for everything. Just brilliant storytelling. You've all watched Twilight Zone. I don't have to tell you this. If you haven't watched in a while, it's definitely worth the rewatch, and it just gets deeper the more you watch, the more you get into that series.
Do you have a favorite episode?
I have a couple. I really like the Meredith Burgess one with the nuclear bomb. I don't know why that one always spoke to me. That's tough.
I always love the Dollhouse, the first colorized one, where the guy gets transported. He's got a humdrum life, and he gets transported into the dollhouse.
Yeah, the Chatty Cathy was a freaky one. Okay. I just shut everybody up. Okay.
Everyone has their line.
that was the Tomi line.
No, it's a happy one. It's yay, ew, 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 yay, it's so good.
Oh, the salesman one. I think that would definitely be one of my favorites. When he's trying to cheat death by making his ultimate sale. Yeah. And I thought that was just such a great premise in everything that is in that. Christina, what is your number one?
Well, first, let me just say, I think the Chatty Cathy episode was our intro into Chucky, but
yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
X-Files, hands down. And I think it sounds silly, but I want to believe. Mm-hmm. And just the whole premise of the show, their tagline, the stories as you dug into them, because they can be standalones, but if you actually watch them together, there's that underlying story being told beneath it. And and it was forbidden in my house.
Another one?
Oh, but that was only for the first beginning, because I moved out shortly thereafter because I was actually an adult. But yeah, no, it just resonates deeply within me,
Nice.
Right on.
Blythe?
My number one is American Horror Story. That show, I know that one probably crosses your line.
I have not made it through a full episode.
Especially the Coven season.
Yes. That show has done a great job of starting a show that seems to go season by season with their own stories, but now in these later seasons, they're tying this universe together. And I'm a sucker for an expanded universe. And this just does a great job of doing it subtly and just kind of ramping it up. And for them to keep the same, and now shows are starting to try and emulate it. You have a couple of shows now where they're keeping the same actors from season to season, like American Horror Story did. But I think it's different. it's different from a lot of things that we've seen in the past. So I really enjoy it.
They get outstanding actors.
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna say there are very few shows that I watch consistently that almost every episode it gives you chills at some point.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they're so brilliant with doing that.
Yeah.
So Tommy?
My number one, sadly, only had 5 seasons, and it was clear that they were ready to launch into the next one, but they ran out of money. The studio did not want to spend the money for it. And that is The Magicians. I absolutely love that show. Not all of the acting is spectacular. You definitely see them sort of, some of them grow and some of them
don't.
Some of them don't. And then you have like Hale Appleman, who is just exquisite from beginning to end. Not my favorite singer, but he's so delightful. I'm like, go ahead and sing. They did several musical episodes. Some were stronger than others. Some were like, you're very clearly just a fan of musicals, and so am I. Time and a place / do it really well, and sometimes they didn't, sometimes they didn't. But it's essentially Harry Potter. One of our listeners described it really well. It's Harry Potter in grad school with all of the flaws that come with it. Another not safe for work
R-rated
show.
Yeah.
It's R-rated. It is R-rated. But God, it's funny. It's funny, and it's
heartbreaking
great.
Sometimes. It's good.
Heartbreaking.
It's so good.
Surprising.
That show was originally on Sci-Fi Channel, right?
Yes.
It
is now on Netflix.
It's on Netflix, but did Netflix do the last season, or did Sci-Fi do it?
Sci-Fi
and Netflix is just showing it.
Did they? I thought
Sci-Fi did it, and they played it, but that's when COVID hit, and literally it got split by months between the last couple episodes.
I wonder, Shitomi, if that's one of the shows that, like Lucifer, that Netflix picks back up and they do something else with it, because that show has a solid following, which I would be interested if Netflix picks it up and puts some money into.
I'm kind of done without Quentin, though.
You know what? We're in a world of magic. He could come back.
Fair enough.
You said it yourself at the beginning of this episode that they could bring people back in different forms.
Don't use my words against me. Outstanding. This was a fun episode, guys. Thank you for doing this with me.
Thank you.
So, go to our website, www.iheartgeekshow.com. Use the column we paid extra for it. New stuff on it. It's amazing. If you haven't checked it out, you should. Go to our Patreon. We're going to have a metric poop ton of new content that will be only for Patreon people.
I thought that was wait. I thought it was your New Year's resolution not to use metric poop ton.
That was Blyze's New Year's resolution that I didn't use it. I never said a word about it.
Now it's to destroy him.
Check out all our stuff. Go to all our Facebook, like our stuff, subscribe, and most importantly, share us with a friend, because we know you have friends that would like what we do too. Until next time, I'm Dub. I'm here with the Cheeky Chi. I'm here with Blyze. I'm here with Satomi. Keep on geeking on, guys. That was my magic.
You have been listening to the latest episode of the iHeart Geek Show. Make sure you visit our website at www.iheartgeekshow.com. Make sure to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And if you check us out on YouTube, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And keep on geeking on to all of you geek rock stars.